Kelly's producer had given up trying to signal and was just watching in horrified fascination. That is a muff. Kelly's voice exploded through the studio with such force that everyone, including Randy, took a step back. You don't get to come on my show and call me a fascist enabler. You don't get to attack everything I've built because you think your way is the only right way. Your way is killing people. Kelly, Randy shouted back. All pretense of theatrical control gone now. Your way is teaching an entire generation that politeness is more important than justice, that comfort is more valuable than truth. And your way is teaching them that anger is the only valid emotion, that if you're not screaming, you're not caring enough. Kelly was fully unleashed now. Years of media training abandoned in favor of raw honesty. You want to know what's really killing people, Randy? It's despair. It's the constant drumbeat of doom that you and people like you pump out every single day. Randy laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. So, it's my fault that people are depressed about the state of the world? Not the actual state of the world, but my commentary on it? Yes, Kelly screamed, and the word echoed through the suddenly silent studio. Yes, Randy, because you offer nothing. You tear everything down. You mock everyone who tries to build something positive. And then you wonder why people give up hope. I offer truth. Kelly, I offer the radical concept that we should call things what they are instead of pretending there's something else. Truth? Kelly's laugh was bitter. No, your truth is that everything is terrible, and everyone who doesn't agree with you is evil. That's not truth. Randy, that's nihilism wrapped in rainbow colors and set to show tunes. Randy went very still, his face cycling through several expressions, before settling on something cold and final. You know what, Kelly? You're right. I am nihilistic because I've watched people like you smile and wave while the world burns. And I've realized that maybe it deserves to burn if this is what we choose to protect. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several audience members audibly gasped. Kelly's face went white, then red, then white again. Get out, she said quietly. What? Randy blinked, his theatrical persona flickering back online. Get out of my studio. Get off my show. Get out. Kelly's voice was deadly calm now, more terrifying than when she'd been shouting. Security. Kelly, darling, surely we can, Randy began. But two large men in black suits were already moving toward the set. No, Kelly said, her eyes never leaving Randy's face. You came here to burn everything down. Congratulations, you did it. Now leave. Randy looked around the studio at the frozen audience, at the cameras still rolling, at the crew members staring in shock. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and something almost vulnerable flickered across his face. This isn't over, Kelly, he said, but his voice lacked the heavy silence that followed. Randy's exit was more deafening than the shouting match had been. In the control room, the technical director's hands hovered over the switcher, paralyzed. Usually, the transition to commercial was a seamless dance of graphics and upbeat bumpers. But the air in the studio had become thick, almost unbreathable. Kelly didn't move from her mark. Her chest heaved, the sequins on her dress catching the harsh studio lights like tiny, jagged shards of glass. She could feel the eyes of every camera operator and production assistant on her, waiting for the America's Sweetheart mask to slide back into place. But for the first time in her career, the recovery didn't come. The audience sat in a state of collective paralysis. Some were crying, others were whispering frantically, and a few were filming the empty stage on their phones, sensing they had just witnessed the end of an era. Backstage, the tension was even more volatile. Randy Rainbow was being escorted toward the loading dock, his heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete floor. The security guards remained silent, a wall of professional indifference against his occasional muttered remarks. As they reached the heavy steel doors that led to the alleyway, Randy stopped and turned. The theatricality was gone, replaced by a weary, sharp-edged exhaustion. He looked at the guards, not as obstacles, but as symbols of the very walls he had been trying to tear down. He adjusted his glasses, which had slipped during the confrontation, and felt the cool city air rushing in. He knew the clip was already being uploaded to social media. He knew the headlines were already being written. In his mind, he wasn't the villain. He was the only one brave enough to stop the music and point out that the ballroom was on fire. Inside the studio, the producer finally found his voice through Kelly's earpiece. Kelly, we have 90 seconds. We need to know if you can go back out there. or if we need to run a repeat segment. Kelly didn't answer immediately. She walked over to her chair and sat down, her legs suddenly feeling like lead. She looked at the colorful, friendly set, the bright sunflowers, the comfortable velvet sofa where she had interviewed hundreds of legends, and it all felt like a lie. Randy's words about comfortable ignorance rang in her ears like a physical pain. She realized that the truth he offered was a poison, but she also wondered if her hope had become a sedative. She took a deep breath, wiped a stray tear before it could ruin her makeup, and signaled to the floor manager. She wasn't finished, but the conversation had changed forever. The red light on camera 1 flickered back to life, signaling the end of the commercial break. But the atmosphere remained fractured. Kelly sat on the edge of her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The upbeat theme music that usually ushered the show back from break had been cut entirely by the music director. It felt too jarring, too dishonest for the current mood. Instead, there was only the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a siren from the street outside. Kelly looked into the lens, her eyes still rimmed with a faint redness that no amount of touch-up powder could fully hide. She didn't lead with a joke or a segment tease. She didn't mention the upcoming musical guest. She simply stared into the homes of millions of viewers and leaned into the discomfort. I think we all just saw something that wasn't supposed to happen. She began, her voice steady but fragile. And I'm not going to pretend it didn't. While Kelly spoke to the cameras, the digital world was already in a state of total meltdown. In the green room, the next guest, a young actress there to promote a romantic comedy, watched the monitors with wide eyes, her publicist frantically typing on 2 different phones. The clip of the Nihilism in Show Tunes comment had gone viral within 3 minutes of the broadcast. On social media, the battle lines were being drawn with surgical precision. To some, Kelly was a hero standing up for the soul of the country, against a wave of cynical destruction. To others, Randy was a martyr for the truth, the only person willing to scream that the house was burning while everyone else talked about the decor. The production office was flooded with calls from network executives, sponsors, and news outlets, all demanding a statement. The Kelly Clarkson Show was no longer a daytime escape. It had become the epicenter of a national debate on the limits of civility. Kelly continued her monologue, moving away from the scripted teleprompter entirely. She talked about the weight of being positive in a world that feels increasingly heavy. She admitted, for the first time publicly, that the pressure to be the light sometimes felt like it was extinguishing her own. She spoke about Randy, not with the anger she had shown minutes before, but with a profound, localized sadness. She questioned aloud if they were both right, if the world was indeed suffering from both a lack of truth and a lack of hope. As she spoke, the crew in the wings stood perfectly still. The floor manager, who had worked in television for 30 years, felt a chill. This wasn't just a talk show anymore. It was a public confession. As the final seconds of the broadcast ticked away, Kelly's raw vulnerability had achieved something rare in modern television. A moment of genuine, unscripted human connection. The studio audience, previously divided and shocked, sat in a heavy, reflective silence. When the cameras finally cut to black, Kelly didn't immediately stand up. She stayed in her chair, the weight of the day finally crashing down on her. Her head chef and longtime friend walked onto the set, placing a quiet, supportive hand on her shoulder. The adrenaline that had fueled her defense was gone, leaving behind a hollow ache. She knew that by tomorrow, every news cycle would be dissecting her words, looking for cracks in her armor. But as she looked at her crew, the people she called her family, she saw not judgment, but a profound sense of relief. They had finally seen the person behind the persona, and they were still standing there with her. Across town, Randy Rainbow sat in the back of a darkened car, the neon lights of the city blurring past the window. His phone was a constant vibration of notifications, a digital storm of praise and vitriol that he couldn't bring himself to look at just yet. He felt a strange, cold clarity. He had always used his wit as a shield, a way to process a world that felt increasingly chaotic and cruel. In the studio, that shield had turned into a sword, and he had swung it at one of the few people who still believed in the power of a smile. He didn't regret his words. He still believed the truth was a fire that needed to burn, but he felt the sting of the isolation that truth-telling often brought. He was the jester who had gone too far, the satirist who had forgotten that even the most broken hearts need a reason to keep beating. The fallout of the Great Studio War would last for months, sparking conversations in coffee shops and boardrooms alike. It became a cultural touchstone, a moment where the polite facade of entertainment finally cracked under the pressure of a divided society. Kelly and Randy would eventually find their own paths forward, scarred but changed by the encounter. Kelly began to incorporate more hard conversations into her show, proving that kindness didn't have to be quiet. Randy, in turn, found moments of sincerity in his art, realizing that a song could be a bridge as well as a weapon. They never spoke again, but they remained forever linked as two sides of the same coin, the optimist and the realist, both desperately trying to save a world that was moving too fast for either of them to catch.